Whoever bloody thought I would make this video? Not me, that's for sure. I'm British, so talk about money is usually completely off the table. But here's why I'm doing it anyway. I left a role where I made a little over £260,000 in that final year, 3 days after being told I was getting a pay rise. Before this, the only two people who knew my salary were my partner and my dad. But since coaching, I've spoken to countless people who say they have a great looking life. Looking being the key word. But they wondered if they'd built the right version of their life. And before we spoke, they had no one to share it with. Either it seemed ungrateful, rude, or others just didn't get it. I didn't leave because I hated it. Quite the contrary. Yet there was this nagging sense that if I completely reimagined my life, it wouldn't look much like it did. And that debate raged internally and with my partner for 2 years. I'd basically won the lottery once. Could I really win it again? Am I a bad person for wanting something different when I already have so much? Can I just grin and bear it for the next 30 plus years? In all likelihood, you don't need to blow up your life to feel alive like I did. But there are 5 questions worth asking. I asked them and they led me to leave and do something entirely different. Most people ask them and they don't leave. But they do have a whole heap more fun on the other side of answering them. Question 1. When did you last feel genuinely alive at work? And what was different then? Hopefully it was yesterday or this morning. Whenever it was, most people can answer it instantly. There was a time, a project, a role, a moment where work felt actually meaningful. And if you can't, perhaps that is the most revealing of all. For me, it was the people that made me feel most alive, helping them grow, understand what they wanted, watching them step into bigger opportunities. It was less so the P&L, the strategy decks, or the week in can, although I did really quite enjoy that one. My days were window dressing for what really mattered, a vehicle to deliver for my team. And so I realized, not in that moment, but slowly over time, that I could strip away everything and just do the bits that I loved, without the e-commerce guys. And I think you know exactly what moment comes to mind for you right now. How can you do more of that? And if you can't get it where you are, is there somewhere else you could? So, when did you last feel genuinely alive at work? And what was different then? Once I realized my aliveness was mixed with a whole heap of other shit I really didn't care that much about, the next question was a tough pill to swallow, but the medicine I needed to understand what I really wanted from my life. What do you know to be true that you haven't been willing to say out loud? If now is your time to leave, you likely will have thought of something in that moment that I said the question. Depending on where you are, you may even have looked left and right to ensure nobody has registered your devilish thought. Because no matter how hard you try and suppress it, push it down and tell yourself to be grateful, it continues to rear its head, saying you really know that you don't want to be doing this. I knew the answer for far longer than I cared to admit. It's why I have a litany of failed side hustles. I told myself I was just fascinated with business and that tinkering was fun. But really, I hoped one would take off so I could leave and pursue that. At work, I'd let myself get distracted by the next goal, the next target to hunt down. But deep down, I knew what was going on. And so I kept going because stopping meant admitting something I wasn't ready to admit yet. I'd even hired my own coach. We talked about any number of topics, but one remained secretly off limits. It wasn't until my partner and I went for a walk around a beautiful lake just outside Lisbon that I addressed it head on. I was trying so hard to make everything more manageable, to enjoy work more, to focus on the positives, to be grateful for all aspects of it, but I just fundamentally didn't want to do it anymore. The money, the kudos, the fact that my parents could describe it proudly at a cocktail party, none of it mattered anymore because it wasn't how I wanted to live my life. I wish deciding was the hard part, but after that I still had many wobbles. We'd sign a new client and I'd think, see, this is pretty damn cool. A new team member would get promoted and I'd think maybe I could make this even more about them than me. But it was like I'd let the genie out of the bottle. And once it was out, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to stuff it back in. What do you know to be true that you haven't been willing to say out loud? I don't know about you, but but I felt bloody exposed here. I had said it. I knew it was true. I'd felt the relief from actually saying it to my partner, and she'd seen in my eyes that I meant it. So was I going to piss or get off the pot? Honestly, I really, really felt like sitting there some more, ignoring the fact that quitting was what I actually wanted to do. Question 3. What is the cost of staying and of leaving? Cue melodrama. It turns out my assumption was that if I left, I'd become eminently unemployable, lose all the savings we had, and within one short year, end up homeless and on the streets. But as I dug deeper, I began to see that that was never the true fear. Not really. You see, deep down, I always trusted my ability to figure shit out. The significance, now that was a tricky bugger to shift. People might not know exactly your salary, but they can see it's not too shabby. And that's a pretty nice feeling. I had a nice title that carried some weight and people understood. A team that looked up to me for direction. Before stopping to ask this question, I would have denied point blank that any of this meant anything at all to me. But it did, and honestly, I didn't really like how much it did. This led me to unpick the perceived costs I had one by one. What comes up for you as I asked that question? So what is the cost of staying and of leaving? You're paying one way or another, so it's best to get clear on what the cost actually is and isn't. Once I got to this point, there was another question that came up that honestly used to really just piss me off. Am I staying because I want to, or because I'm scared of what leaving says about me? The reason it frustrated me so much is because I fundamentally believed everything was figure-outable. I would look at other people, incredibly successful people, famed for their long hours, and say to myself, well, look, they work a damn sight harder than me. They have 1,000,000 times more pressure than me, and they can handle it. In fact, they're thriving. The fear was that despite the career that had gone before, there would still be those conversations where people would say, see, I knew he couldn't hack it. I believed I should be able to find a way to manage my bandwidth, my motivation, my gratefulness for the role, all of it. And that by leaving, I was in some way weak for not being able to stick it out. And the one that probably scared me the most of all was that people would say, he gave it up for that? Really? And so for me, that came down to one simple realization. Who gives a shit? As cliche as it sounds, we all have one crack at life. Was I going to say that I won at someone else's version of the game or mine? So I'll ask it again. Am I staying because I want to, or because I'm scared of what leaving says about me? And finally, the one that made it all undeniable. Question 5. If you stay for another 5 years, what does life actually look like? Sure, I could have more money in the bank. I ran those calculations. I knew where my path was heading. But, almost with some regret, it wasn't heading where I wanted it to go. I didn't want my boss's lives, so why keep building towards it? For me, all I saw was that in 5 years' time, things would be harder to change, not easier. The golden handcuffs would be a little tighter. Perhaps I would be a little bit more apathetic. And how much harder it would be to reimagine my life, my path then. I know people that would answer this very differently. Even those who have the desire to leave might cite financially independent, retire early, and that once they have hit their financial number, they can leave and live on their own terms. And all power to them, but that just wasn't for me. What does yours look like, honestly? Not the version you tell people at dinner, but the truly honest one. If you stay for another 5 years, what does life actually look like? The answer to these questions will look different for you. I asked them, they led me to leave. For you, it might lead you somewhere entirely different. And that's the point. When I ask the same questions to the people I work with, most of the people don't leave. Most of them realize that what they actually want is available to them now. It just requires honesty and intention to find it. The decision to stay or go is almost never the real question. It's the last one. The real questions are the ones you've been avoiding. I left a £260,000 a year role, not because I was miserable or brave or had it all figured out, but because when I finally asked myself the questions I knew I hadn't been willing to say out loud, I couldn't unknow the answer. You might ask the same questions and stay, change roles, or leave. but knowing the answer gives you the power to choose. Which of these questions gave you the answer you needed most? Or which are you most scared of asking yourself? Leave a comment. And if you want more on designing a life with intention, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.